Recently, I played through the very first Elder Scrolls, Arena, and beaten it. This is something I have never done before. Arena is a bit of a challenge for a lot of players due to its antiquated controls and general difficulty. Having beaten it, I felt like sharing thoughts on this game. I'll discuss my backstory in relation to the Elder Scrolls, give a really quick overview of its narrative, describe the gameplay, my experience with it, and what impression it left me with. Let's begin. So, anyone who knows me knows that I do enjoy playing older games. Some commenters even claim they saw me as a bit of an old school gamer. And, while I have played Morrowind through Skyrim, Arena and Daggerfall have been games that have long eluded me. Attempts to play either have been met with repeated failure. I started thinking these may be those types of games that were so archaic that I just couldn't get a handle on them. But I finally decided that I was going to play through Arena, no matter what. And you know what? That they may have been too archaic? Well, I guess it was true to some extent. I had to actually mod the game to rebind the keys so it felt more familiar with me, as someone who is incredibly used to the WASD setup. But with that, I found myself actually ready. This started some months ago, and I had a pretty long hiatus of not playing and picked it up again. Overall, I gathered about 36 or so hours in the game, which according to this website puts me somewhere between playing leisurely and playing normally. And it was an interesting experience. Let's briefly go over the plot. It's very simple. Emperor Septim VII is imprisoned in another dimension by his Imperial battle mage, Jagar Tharn, using a fancy magical staff called the Staff of Chaos. Tharn's apprentice, Rhea Silmaine, sees this go down and gets killed. Tharn takes Septim's image to rule in his stead. Tharn breaks the staff into 8 pieces and scatters them across Tamriel. Rhea's ghost talks to you, the player, because you're the only one left in the Imperial Court able to do so. You're basically the last resort. Good luck, champ. Like I said, simple setup. Go find the 8 MacGuffins. As you may know, Arena wasn't originally intended to be an RPG. It started off as a gladiator combat game, hence the Arena title, and the cover art. It does feel a bit odd in that regard. Combat takes a bit of a learning curve for someone used to more modern controls. Swinging your sword requires you to hold down right click and move the mouse. It's a bit obvious when you know, but at first it's kinda confusing. Most games that modern players have been brought up on don't really do this, but again, this title is from a different era. This game is also fairly menu heavy, at least compared to more modern games. It's all laid out in the bottom UI or specific keys to quickly access them. You get used to it, and a lot of these are still true, like casting spells or using an item. But today they're more organized, or have a quick select option for a specific spell or item you would like to use. In addition, this game focuses on combat very heavily, meaning there's very little you can do outside of combat except getting gossip or buying stuff. In fact, it's probably closer to a dungeon crawler than an RPG, by just how much time you be spending in dungeons. Sure, there's some side quests you can grab, all randomly generated. Yeah, the whole Radiant Quest thing isn't actually new. There's a precursor in the series' founding title. It'd choose a random quest to do with equally random NPCs, locations, and the like. Go figure, most of them are about going to a dungeon. Still, among these side quests were artifact hunting. Yep, same artifacts that exist in later Elder Scrolls games. I'll get back to that in a bit.
While the game covers the entirety of Tamriel,
including famous settings of later titles, you'll probably spend at least 90% of your time in a dungeon of some kind. Given there's 18 of them in the main quest alone, 2 of them being the dungeon you wake up in and the dungeon you close out of, and 8 of them you have to do so you can get the locations of the other 8 dungeons that have parts of the Staff of Chaos. So consistent dungeon crawling is the bread and butter of the title. You'll be fighting a lot, but you get better at the game as you progress, naturally. And mage builds can make some of the challenges of the dungeons not really a big deal. So with that out of the way, let's get to my experience. I went for a Breton spell sword. I like abusing magic and enchantments, and this game offered magic abuse. However, when I first started the game, I had a rough time out of the gate. No surprise, huh? Older games often have a difficult learning curve to go through. With this title, the early game enemies, goblins and rats, could be relatively tough to deal with, but they're designed to be handled by your weak character. That said, the difficulty ramped up a bit due to the nature of this game. Resting to restore health was often a risk, as it carried the consequence of having to potentially deal with random, possibly more powerful enemies, ranging from enemy spell swords to golems in later maps. This resulted in me hiding and crying in a corner, desperately trying to restore health with a heavy dose of save scumming. I died. Quite a lot. Eventually got some decent early game gear and still felt incredibly lost. At least until it dawned on me that in this game, the map system is actually pretty important. Later games you could blindly fumble around until you found where you needed to go. Here, doing that isn't so simple. Every dungeon is a legit maze. The map system helped show me where the walls, doors, entrances, and exits were. Everything looks the same otherwise. Eventually I started getting a handle on the combat and found my way out. I entered the town and just looked around a bit. Started to see how communicating, shopping, and questing worked. I decided to gain some strength by doing a few randomly generated side quests. I got more and more comfortable with the mechanics and found myself slowly going through dungeons, using a lot of resting, relying on the armor pieces that I picked up, and what little magic I had when things started to get a bit more dangerous. Remember how I said artifacts were in the game? You'll probably want to get some of them because they could give you extremely powerful boosts, particularly the Ogma Infinium, which grants an immediate 50 points to one of your attributes. And you could abuse the game mechanics to get more than one artifact, including multiple Ogma Infiniums. I wanted to get some artifacts. I gathered 2 Ogma Infiniums and the Necromancer's Amulet. I pumped up intelligence with the books, and the amulet gave me fortified intelligence and spell absorption. And that's when I started abusing magic. I created a spell to give myself a magical shield that grew more powerful as I leveled, and spell absorption to refill my mana whenever something casted magic at me, allowing me to once again create the shield when it broke. It was pretty great. I could make and eat a sandwich while an enemy kept striking at me. With that power boost, I decided to start chasing down the MacGuffins, the pieces of the Staff of Chaos. It's a loop of going to a province, then a town, talking to someone, clearing a dungeon for them so I could come back, get the next dungeon, get a staff piece, go to the next province, repeat. But now I can clear them faster, and combined with Pass Wall, a spell that can take out wall segments, I can create shortcuts and make parts of the game completely optional. And as I got closer and closer to the end game, I strengthened myself even further. Stronger shields, stronger spell absorption, and weapons made out of stronger material, especially needed since some enemies require a minimum tier to even hurt them. Eventually, only extremely high-level enemies became anything close to resembling a problem, and then only mildly. Finally, I came to the last dungeon, went through with only mild difficulty, and came across Tharn. I beat him up for a bit, but dude didn't want to die. Looked it up, and apparently he's immune to weapon damage and maybe spell damage, but I'm not sure about that. But hey, why not give him the monk treatment? Of course, being a plot enemy, once his health was depleted, he shielded himself. Had to go blast a Heart of Fire with the Staff of Chaos, and he was destroyed that way. Technically, I didn't have to fight him, but you know what? I didn't come all the way out here to not deck him in the face. Oh, and also the Emperor was released, so that's cool, I guess. And at the end, all I got was an attaboy and a title. So overall, Arena was something I found myself enjoying a bit, but it can be frustrating to play when you're used to modern design. Not being able to look up and down is probably the most annoying aspect. Heavy menu reliance, especially for magic, is another aspect. But at the same time, I also like the difficulty and challenges it presented, even if I nullified it greatly with magic abuse. Of course, I'm someone who loves to abuse magic and break games. That's the biggest contributing factor why I loved Morrowind so much. Actually, some spells like Pass Wall kinda makes the magic feel even more powerful. Seriously, just removing a wall so you can get through a goal faster makes you feel amazingly overpowered, even godlike. This isn't replicated at all today for balance reasons, but man do I love me some magic abuse. Some other aspects to note is how, well, janky the game feels. Enemies can just get stuck on walls. It's weird how their sprite will just stick out, trying to charge at you, and just unable to move. It isn't a big deal, easy kill and kind of funny, but it does make the game feel like it's held together with bubblegum and band-aids. A more annoying variant comes with the enemies being solid and some pathways that you have to climb up to being narrow. And since you can't look up and hit them, you're basically stuck. May have to leave and come back hoping they despawn, may have to reload, or cast magic in the middle of your view and hope it blasts them. It's very frustrating. Again, bubblegum and band-aids. A lot of this game is randomly generated, and the side quest dungeon you take on feel very different from the main quest dungeon. Like you could tell the main quest dungeons were crafted by people over the side questing ones. Still, overall I enjoyed it, perhaps for the magic abuse more than anything as far as gameplay goes. There isn't much to do beyond dungeon crawling after all. But another aspect I really enjoyed is just seeing the very beginning of the franchise. What aspects carried over to future titles, and what aspects were changed bit by bit for lore. For instance, the artifacts carried over, and some city names of certain province carried over. Names for specific beasts were changed, and the Daedric princes have not yet come. I wouldn't exactly recommend Arena for gameplay reasons. As a game, I imagine this title is not very intriguing to many new players, especially younger ones who dislike archaic game design. It's not impossible to enjoy. I obviously did more than not. But as a historical piece, something to absorb, compare, and experience a product from a bygone era, well, yeah. If you're like me and enjoy playing older games as a bit of a time capsule, yes, you'll like it quite a lot, I think. So don't play it for the game, play it for history.
A very special thanks to my channel members, especially the Members Thrice Over members like That Crazy Game Developer and Denny McPhee. If you wish to support me and join us as well, I'd be more than happy. Otherwise, like, share, subscribe, all that typical YouTube stuff. Thank you. Have a good one.